Club VITO is on. Your only connection to the very important top officer and unlimited sales success. Your host, Anthony Parinello, is a best-selling author. He's trained over 2 million sales professionals and 65 of the Fortune 100. This program will take you to sales heaven and keep you out of sales hell. So turn it up. Now, here's your host, Tony Parinello.
Yeah, hello, everybody. You bet your sweet bippy it'll keep you out of sales hell, the place where you work your little keister off, jump through all the hoops, do everything you need to do, all the discovery, all the due diligence, everything you can possibly do to get the sale, and then it stalls. And then you're waiting and waiting and waiting and leaving voicemail messages and not getting return calls. If you do get the business, it's a little itsy-bitsy, teensy-weensy sale. On the flip side of that is sales heaven. Now, sales heaven is where you're going to work. Sure, you're going to work, but you know what? You're going to be rewarded with big sales, huge sales, that happen in like half the amount of time if you follow the process we talk about here, the VITO Selling process. And with me today, because it's a very special day, I have head business building coach Steve Dailey with me. So, Steve, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here, Tony, and you just drew a great distinction between mastery and mediocrity. Mediocrity is just trying to do the best you can, which never seems to be enough, and mastery is learning about how to put a proven formula and principles behind your effort to come out with a way different result. I love what you do.
Well, Coach Steve, I was gonna throw something into your lap totally different than what you just said. But let's follow this for our show today. Let's follow the difference here between being just another face in the crowd to standing out and reaching mastery in sales. Now, if you've been listening to Coach Steve and I for a while, and I sure hope you have, you'll know that Steve is the mindset master, and I'm the methods guy. And so let me ask you this, Steve. What is the mindset difference between someone who's just kind of poking along, doing the best they can, and someone who takes on the task of mastery?
Well, as you would expect or suspect, Tony, there's more than one characteristic, more than one mindset. Let's talk through a few that come to mind. The first one is a mindset that embraces abundance. When you I think you've got a tip in your archives where I talk about this. But when a person believes truly in their core, in their gut, in their knower, that there really is no limit to access, to wealth, to fulfillment. When a person really knows that there's no limit except their own, hesitation, doubt, their own self-imposed limitation, then immediately you open a gate for mastery. You can't get to mastery if you don't have abundance thinking. The converse, of course, being scarcity thinking. There's never enough. I can't do it. Those things.
Well, hold on a second here. Let's dwell on this for a moment. This self-imposed limitation you're talking about. Where the hell do we get that from?
Well, we get that from history, in summary. We've talked about this in a slightly different context, but think about this. As soon as you're old enough to tie your own shoes, to carry your own toys, to clean up your plate after dinner, there are people around us, at first it's parents, that basically define what is acceptable, what is excellent, what is appropriate for acknowledgement. Then we go to school, and we spend 12 years, and then some of us are crazy enough to sign up for more of that, where there's this swirl of assignments and expectations and standards and grades, and all determined by somebody else, teachers, and in fact, a competition with peers. Then we sign up for a job. And if you really want punishment, then you sign up for a military stick in the middle or gig in the middle. And then we're surrounded again with people that are setting the expectations for telling us when we need to get out of bed, what time we can, go to the potty, when we can go on vacation, when we can sleep, all of that. And we basically acquire through history a reflex that basically surrenders to what everybody else thinks and everybody else's standard, and never really practices setting our own standard to open the gate, as I just mentioned, to more, to abundance, to freedom.
Sounds to me like there's a huge list in our history that gives this self-impaired limitation. How do we start erasing that, or not maybe erasing it, but seeing it and changing and modifying our view? Because those two very, very simple statements you start out with, either embracing abundance and feeling and knowing that there's really no limit to our potential, versus the mindset of scarcity. And I'm just to hold on to what I have, because if I take a risk, I might lose what little I have. How do we begin that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. There's two things, and they're simple but not easy. You just have to embrace that idea. And by the way, success is actually simple but not easy. But the two things that we can do to start to rebuild a muscle of self-sufficiency that opens the gate to abundance and therefore mastery, as we're talking about here, is one, to set goals, ambitious goals, to you define what your goals are. This is why, and I know you white knuckle the microphone when I say this, but this is why I'm so opposed to quotas, because it's somebody else's goal. It's not yours. And when you start to set your own goals, that is the first step toward basically countering this infliction that we've been swallowed up by in our culture. And the second thing, quickly, to do this is to challenge yourself. As you know, I love to take on new things, to explore new things, to little and small. I think I mentioned on a show not too long ago that I actually decided to teach myself how to tie my shoes differently than I had my whole life at the age of 64. And then you have also climbed mountains and swum oceans and all the crazy things. And so being willing to take on challenges and in the wake of even learning how to set your own goals, that's the breakthrough right there for what we're talking about.
So if we were to say, okay, step one of that is that really what you just pointed to, by challenging yourself to do other things that maybe are smaller than the daunting task of flipping our switch to abundant thinking, or turning the volume up on abundant thinking and turning it down on scarcity thinking. So do we try something small? Let me give you an example of this. I love bookstores, you know that, and I'm a crazy reader. I love to read. I'm reading like 3 or 4 books at a time. Anyway, I'm in a bookstore poking around, looking for a gift for someone else. And I see this kit on learning how to juggle. Now, I must tell you, as I've traveled the world, I like bringing little things with me that I could entertain children with and just entertain myself with, when I'm trekking or doing whatever. So I bought this learning how to juggle kit, which has these 3 little soft kind of balls. So you can stuff them in your pocket, you can put them in your suitcase, you can do this on it. So I started juggling, and it opens up your mind to understanding something new, and the brain and mindset it takes to learn something, like sticking with it and not giving up, not saying, oh, this is too hard, I'm not going to give up. And so it even says it in the instruction book, man, don't go to step 2 until you finish step 1. And so what is it in our mind that wants us to rush through something and not stay focused, or maybe not even finish it to completion, to start this reset, if that makes sense? Kind of bounced around there, but...
Yeah, it does. No. You're dead on, Tony. Let me let me amplify something you just said, though. Before I answer your question, taking on something new not only helps you develop the I guess the muscle, we'll call it, of discovery, that you can learn something new, that you're not limited, the kind of casting off or casting aside this sense of limitation that we grow up with. But what also happens behind that, and you tell me if this isn't true, behind the learning the new skill comes a new level of confidence about your own capability, your competency, your abilities, that it feels that, well, it's basically fulfillment. Did you not feel that way?
Yeah, totally. I totally felt that way. Yeah. And you know, it's interesting here again that scarcity thinking comes in. When I first started, God, I'm not very coordinated. I don't know if I could do this. Little something leaches in that says maybe I can't, maybe I should stop. Why did I buy this? And so, yeah, I kind of pushed through that. I don't know why I pushed through that, though.
Well, because and we all are. So I'll just make a point that we could also talk about at some point in the future in more detail. But I believe that all that's seated in every human being is ambition. I really don't buy that a person that can be labeled as lazy. I think there's ambition. Laziness shows up really mostly because of fear, but that's a whole nother topic and conversation you might want to challenge me with on another day. But let's go to this focus thing, Tony, and sticking with something, until you can master it and then therefore move on, or finishing step one and getting good at step two before you move on to step three. This too is part of mastery, and it's a mindset thing. So we started with abundance thinking, and now let's talk about we'll call it progressive mastery. So you never get really great at any one thing or any big thing unless you get really great at the small things. This is fundamental in sports, for example. We learn the basics, the fundamentals. We are supposed to be learning this in school, although either we aren't paying attention or they've got the whole method of teaching that's messed up. But yeah, we oftentimes overlook and don't really get the fundamentals there. But that's available to us. Any new thing, when you learned how to play the guitar and you started with the fundamentals of the chords and the strings and the scale and what made music, and so mastering the small thing before the big thing is essential. And what I find in working, let's apply this to business people. I find, Tony, that salespeople, for example, want to try to be, talk to everybody about every product, about every single thing that they do before they really zero in on a specific value that they can really talk about and be an expert in, a specific product or value set that they can really, zero in on, in a specific market or industry that's going to appreciate that. Same is true with entrepreneurs. Always, I think this is a daily conversation, is reeling entrepreneurs back in to focusing on a specific market, a specific message before they want to save the world. So I think specificity and focus are essential in this master game.
Coach Steve, you have just touched on something that affects everything we do, everything. It's so funny you mentioned learning how to play the guitar. I was writing that down when you said that, because one thing I have found is that I didn't take the time to learn some of the basics, and I was impatient with it, so I went, open chords, okay, that's enough of that. I want bar chords. I want some, really heavy metal bar chords. And as I did that, my hand did not have the speed and coordination it needed that I could have built by just transitioning in the open chord. So I had to go back to that. And it disappointed me and frustrated me because by now I should be much further along, and I'm not because I did what you just said. I skipped over some of the small things. I just wanted to be a rock star. And so it had brought to my attention this point you're making is that, man, little steps first and keep taking them until that muscle is there to take the bigger steps. But we are very impatient, aren't we?
We're impatient, and going back to my earlier point, we're ambitious, and that ambition is a good thing. You've heard me say this. Our strengths become weaknesses if left unchecked.
Yeah.
So in all of us, a deep-seated idea or ideal of ambition is great, except when it gets in the way of something better. Let me mention a quick story that I favor. It's really powerful. John Wooden, the greatest basketball coach, arguably in the world and in history, used to hire these recruit these amazingly talented athletes, and they were ready to conquer the world now on a in one of the best schools in the country, if not the world. And he would frustrate them right out of the gate on the first day of practice. For the first 3 days, I think, of practice, he had them simply practice putting on their socks properly. And when they would complain about it, he said, "This is fundamental, boys. You know, if you don't put your socks on correctly, you're going to eventually get a blister, and when you get a blister, you're going to miss the opportunity to practice, and when you miss the opportunity to practice, you fail. And so we're going to get this right, and it's going to be right forever." And I think that's so powerful, and it frustrated them. But guess what? They didn't have any blisters on the team, and those guys didn't miss any practice. So it's strong.
Well, here again, this story makes so much sense because I run into this all the time with students that I teach and organizations that they work for. Sales managers get very impatient and say, "What are you doing? What are you doing spending time there? Make those calls. Come on, I need 15 calls." And I'm trying to teach the salespeople how to make the first call, and the manager's saying, "What are you doing? You'd spend too much time on this. I want you to do that." And so we need to have the skill. I can just imagine these basketball players going home at night telling their parents, what'd you do today at practice in this high-powered school we got you into? Well, we practiced putting on our socks. I could just see the parents showing up at the school the next day, pounding on the coach's door. "What the hell are you doing, my kids? Put on socks." So you have to be able to...
Exactly. No,
yeah, you have to be able to kind of control your environment to some point so you can get the basics down and solve the little problems of the world before we go globally as an entrepreneur, salesperson, solving the big problems. This is absolutely, we can stop right here, and that's the lesson of the day, if not the month. Unbelievable.
Yeah, completely. And just keep in mind, and for listeners, as you're taking notes, just write down the word or the phrase progressive mastery and underline the word progressive. If you think about it, every single thing that you've ever learned, but even more important, every single thing you've ever learned and really begun to do well at, there was a progression. There's no way to avoid it. And then when you just look at the way nature exists and how we basically evolve and go through life, navigate life, those that take a progressive view are those that always achieve greater success, are healthier, live longer, survive the inevitable peaks and valleys and obstacles and things that occur as whether you're a tadpole or somebody striving to run a company or to run the country. There's a progression that is absolutely required, and the reason you want to underscore on progression is when you step over the progression, when you try to shortcut it, when you hurry it up, when you try to be bigger than the progression, when you don't allow yourself to be humble, that's where you see people fail, isn't it? That's where you see salespeople fall, businesses fall, our country's leaders fall. I'm not being political here. This is just a fact of life that progression is required if you want to ever truly achieve mastery. Otherwise, if not respecting progression will take you down.
Unbelievable lesson in life, lesson in sales, lesson in business. I'm telling you, Coach Steve, and you know me, I love taking notes. I'm on my second full page of notes here. I wrote down some numbers: 12, 18, 32, 60, 85. 12, 18, 32, 60, 85. I have a 300-ton skipper's license. It's a master's license because I started as a young man with a 12-foot boat, then I had an 18-foot boat, then I had a 32-foot boat, then I skippered a 60-foot boat, and then I skippered an 85-foot boat. You can't go from 0 to 85 feet a boat without killing somebody or yourself or a whole bunch of other people, not to mention sinking the boat. Just like running a marathon. You start running a 5K, then a 10K, then a 10-miler, then you work your way up to a marathon. If you just show up at the start of the race at a marathon, you're going to kill yourself. So it's a perfect life lesson. Coach Steve, you have nailed it once again. Progressive mastery. Stay with something small until you work to completion on something before you graduate. Yeah. Brilliant, man.
Yeah, and our thank you, and you know, and again, just look, we all come by it honestly. There's not a person listening here. There's not a successful person around you that doesn't actually struggle with metering, monitoring, calibrating the pull of ambition, and that's okay. That's a muscle too. But if you don't master that, another phrase I use all the time is what you don't learn to control will eventually control you. And that doesn't mean you should be a control freak. It just means that you should learn. It's really just simply about discipline, self-discipline, personal accountability to understand that, it all happens in time, but you have to do the work. Like I said, simple, not easy.
Yeah, this last 23 minutes we've been yapping here just points to the I think perhaps, and you know better than I do because you coach people to do this, but this is probably the single most important lesson we could learn when it comes to any accomplishment in life is start small. Well, I'm going to just say progressive mastery. It's a progression. You can't just jump into the middle of something and towards the end of something and be expected to know how to do it and be good at it and reach mastery at it. And it takes patience and stick-to-itiveness, if that's even a word, to pull this off.
Yeah, I agree. And is it the most important? I would say in the context of that it is woven into most everything we do, without a doubt. However, for you, and this may be a great topic for another show, actually, as I said, for each individual, your most important lesson might be something else, but I guarantee this will be woven into almost everything that you're trying to accomplish. So, for example, some people I work with, their biggest challenge first is that, or lesson, if you will, is that they have to learn about this whole goal setting thing, this idea of determining their own destiny by first deciding. I just had an email exchange today with a client who's recognizing that his biggest challenge, his most important lesson is to learn how to battle in advance fear of failure, fear of not qualifying, fear of being defeated in some way. And so, but embedded, notice, if you're hearing what I'm saying, accomplishing or overcoming obstacles has a progressive nature to it as well. And so, yes, this is woven into everything, but your lesson, most important lesson, might be something different.
Well, yeah, to your point, one of the first things you mentioned on the show today was there's more than one mindset that we're dealing with here. And so, yeah, that totally underscore that. Excellent. Well, Coach Steve, would you take a minute, please, and tell everybody how to get a hold of you, Are you still offering a calendar for people to jump on and have a conversation with you, a one-on-one conversation with you?
Yes, I am offering that, and I don't know if I'll ever stop, just simply because I enjoy too much hearing from ambitious people that are reaching for higher, to attain higher levels of success in their own fulfillment. All you can do is you go to schedulecoachsteve.com, schedulecoachsteve.com. That goes right to my calendar. There's an invitation to not only find a time, but tell me what you want to talk about, and I'll spend an hour. What I like to do most is steer the conversation basically almost every time around, all right, where are you in the most important areas of your life as compared to where you believe you can be? And if you want to think about that, and don't have to call me to think about it. Think about that, and that might be a good launching pad for not only applying what we're talking about today, but perhaps opening a conversation with me about how I might be able to help you. So just go to schedulecoachsteve.com. What we'll talk about is what's the gap between where you are and where you believe you can be in any or all important areas of life, obviously including business, and we'll take it from there. And I promise, guarantee, in fact, you walk away feeling better, if not finding a gateway to some new exciting stuff.
That's perfect. Coach Steve, here again, and thanks for your time. Thanks for being who you are and doing what you do. We certainly appreciate it. You always show up, and you always give us something to think about and a pathway to accomplish whatever you're thinking about. And that's what I love so much about the way you structure things and how you communicate stuff to us, is that it's not a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's not a bunch of esoteric terms and conditions. It's very straightforward, rock solid, do it now advice. And so, Coach Steve, thanks again. Everybody else, have a wonderful rest of the day. And Coach Steve, you have yourself a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Club VITO with Tony Parinello. Stay in touch with us 24 hours a day at VITOselling.com or call us with comments and suggestions. This program and its entire contents are the property of Anthony Parinello. Unauthorized duplication or rebroadcast without express written permission of Anthony Parinello is prohibited and unlawful under U.S. copyright law.